G'day and welcome to Choosing Your Uni. I'm Robin Balicki coming to you from Garigal Land in Sydney. Thanks for your company. My guest today from Monash University is Aadya Mishra, and she studies a Bachelor of Advanced Science. But how good is this?
Yeah, it's awesome.
Tell me the twist to your degree.
Sure. So it's called the Bachelor of Science Advanced Global Challenges. And it's a degree where every student does a science major, and there are about 30 or 40 of us in each year. And we do our separate science majors. And then every semester we do a subject together called Impact Through Science. And it's all about exactly that, growing a change making an impact through our science study. And in those subjects, we work in multidisciplinary teams with our peers from different science streams and work in spaces like entrepreneurship, communication, leadership, advocacy, or policy. And it's all about having students with a science literacy, but an interest and a passion in doing better by the world around us. And I feel so motivated and energized being in that cohort and in that course. And it's something I'm super grateful for, to be around other people who care deeply and wholly about what we see and what we do.
I love this because it's so real world. Tell me some of the projects that you've gone stuck into.
So the one I did last semester was an entrepreneurship project with there were 4 of us, and so I'm a mathematics major, and there was an agriculture student, an ecology student, and an environmental science student, and we all used our different science knowledge to work together on a project about it was a service to help small scale farmers earn carbon credits through offsetting or revegetating their land. And in that way, we all get to practice using our different science skills in a way that I think is, as you say, very like resemblant of the real world, where you're not just working in a team of people who've study the exact same thing as you, but in fact it's communicating across different sciences, across different disciplines, and getting to practice those skills in a school setting. I hope it's really valuable and will serve me well in the future.
It's kind of what the working world is really like, though, isn't it? You end up meeting people who've got all sorts of different backgrounds. You come together on a project with a mission or a goal in mind. It doesn't almost matter what you've studied. You're going to have to bridge those gaps, aren't you?
Precisely. And
Fantastic.
it's all about the communication and being able to find a shared mission or find a shared purpose based on your core values or what you think is really important, and then contribute each your own technical expertise. Yeah, as you say, I hope that's going to be an important skill because it's one that we're made to practice a lot in this degree.
So why does it work? I imagine you've been in some groups that have worked better than others, which is pretty normal
That's true.
in context always. The groups that you've been in where you've been collaborating with other people from different discipline backgrounds, if you can think of one maybe where that really worked well, can you think of why maybe that worked?
I think it's the shared values and the shared passion, as I said, for the project that you are doing. So another one, the project I did just before leaving for my exchange was a brief on how we can improve data privacy in Australia. And so that was one that I worked on with a computer science student and a few other Global Challenges students. In that sense, we were all individually so passionate and so incensed, I guess, the more that we read about our data privacy, especially in the way that political parties are able to access our private data because they're exempt from the Australian Data Privacy Act. The more we read, the more we were aghast and surprised and shocked that we'd never read about it before, that we'd never seen much about it before. And so I think that passion and that idea that, you know, it is actually, it's a frontier that it exists in the real world, and it's one that we can work on, and the work that we do in class is actually applicable to the real world. You know, we have a policy brief, we have a call to action video now that we can do something about it. And so in that way, you know, you do it for a grade, sure, in school, but the work that you do is actually relevant, and it doesn't exist in the microcosm of university. And I think that the way in which we are allowed to work on real issues allows us to align ourselves with our peers who care about the same thing. And in that way, I think when you have a fundamental level of concern or a fundamental level of care for what you're doing, regardless of the diversity in the exact details of how we believe we should approach the issues, the fact that something needs to be done is agreed upon. And I think that ultimately drives a cohesion and a collaboration.
Do you think that there's a certain type of person that would be really well suited to that kind of
Mm.
um, degree, that kind of approach?
I fundamentally believe that anybody or this degree or this approach is
Approach, yeah.
something that should be practiced or should be understood by all science students, because science doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's no such thing as just science. Everything has, science in it. Science is in everything. And in that way, for anybody to work with a scientific knowledge, you have to understand the applications, you have to understand the implications of the work that you do in order to do, I think, anything meaningful. So I think if you want to do a science major and if you care about the world, it's a good path to look down.
It's quite funny, isn't it? Because I feel my undergrad was a science degree, and I feel that science is almost its own worst enemy when it comes because of the scientific method, right? The method is you can never prove something; you can only
Mm,
disprove,
mhm,
and we want to be equivocal about our results, point out where the flaws are, point out where the biases and the influences are, and suggest further avenues for research. But as a result, this is why this whole climate stuff took so long for people to actually take action, because the science is like, here's the models, they're very clear to us, but,
mm,
and I think the majority of people don't understand the but in science.
exactly,
Look at the
for sure.
statistics and say, it's an 80% chance, we should be really worried.
Mm,
Instead, cognitive bias clicks in and they're like, oh no, but 20% will be fine. We'll be fine. It's cool. No
mm.
stress. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's why this idea of having a baseline scientific literacy amongst the
Yeah.
rest of society. So even if you have, an interest in anything else, having a literacy or an understanding of scientific language, of the scientific method, of any of that, I think that kind of work that scientists need to do on the front, on the, precipice, on the boundary of science and everything else, that communication and that ability to relate technical information to what the general public understands and cares about is something that is increasingly important. And I think something that we've learned hasn't been done well in the past. And so that's another part of this Global Challenges course that they really push, is to be able to communicate scientific ideas in a way that is human.
It's definitely true, isn't it? You tend to see that the people who get the most traction in science are the people who communicate their ideas the most clearly, and I'm looking for the word, but it's easiest for people to get attached to them for whatever reason, uh,
Mm,
whether that's because there's some sort of outcome that people want downstream, and so
mm,
those some scientific ideas are very exciting because, oh, if we approach things this way, we're going to make more
mm.
money, or lose weight, or live longer, or
Yeah.
insert the
But
above.
equally, I think that that style or that line of communication of picking out the bits that people care about has its
Mm.
risks or its dangers of creating too simple a story and not acknowledging the complexity and the way in which all of these things are so multifaceted and interlinked. And we can't simply say this will happen and this will happen. There's no linear causal link like that in the real world. And so
100%.
I think that's another big risk with communicating science, not just what you were saying before about the how to relate what scientific uncertainty means in the real world, but also how to relate what scientific causality means in the real world.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Tell me about maths. I didn't study maths at uni. Did it at
Yes.
high school, of course. Was
Yeah.
okay at maths. But I guess what's the right word? Like the bias that I have, or the
Mm,
image I have in my head is a very theoretical
yeah.
discipline. But I have
Sure.
a feeling that maybe that's changed a lot, or there's a lot
Yeah.
more to it than I understand.
Well, I think more and more mathematics is adjacent to computer science and
Mm.
data science, and both of those disciplines are huge and buzzwords essentially right now. It's cool. Maybe that's a bit too far, but those are degrees or those are the disciplines that are seen as happening or future facing. But I think what I've come to understand is mathematics really is the mechanics that underpins all of that. I think if you told my high school maths teachers that I was studying maths, they would be as surprised as
Really?
anybody. Yeah, I definitely, as you said, I took maths all the way through high school, but it was never my favorite. It was just something, you had to do it, or, if you could, you did. That's sort of the narrative I feel we were all given about maths. But I got to university and I was trying to pick subjects, trying to pick my major. And I remember reading the description of applied mathematics And at the time, I wanted to major in physics. And I was reading the description of applied mathematics, and I was like, oh, that sounds actually really cool. It's all about, how mathematics is the interesting and fundamental baseline of everything that we see. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do that maybe as a minor on the side. But you can't actually do it as a minor, you have to do it as a major. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that as my major. But as I started going to my physics classes, and I also started with a few computer science courses at uni, I realized that the reason I liked physics, economics, and chemistry in school was it was maths. And the parts that I really liked were the formulaic parts, and the parts that, you could understand proportionality, or you could understand how you do one thing and the other thing changes because there's an equation. You can understand the effect of everything in that way. And the parts I really liked were the mathematics, essentially. And as I was taking physics in first year, I really found myself in this mindset of like, throw the pictures away, just give me the equation and I'll do it from there. And the other thing is also, I really wanted to do this Science Global Challenges degree. I hope I've conveyed to you how much I think it's a great course, but I had to do a science major. And the other thing is, I really hate lab work. There's nothing worse to me than standing in a white coat. It feels like a farce, to be honest. Like I'm a student, I'm not going to prove anything. And I find that really frustrating. So mathematics is just about the only science you can do where you don't have to stand, you have to look like a scientist and stand in the lab with goggles and a lab coat. So here I am, process of elimination.
Isn't that awesome? What I love about that is, you've just been weaving your way through all these different subjects at uni, and suddenly you've found this thing, and you're like, oh yeah, that's it. I've discovered it.
Exactly.
Do you remember the moment? Do you actually remember the moment where that landed on you and like, oh my God, it's all math?
Yeah, it is a bit like that. I think it was in first year when I was in probably my first semester. I was taking computer science, physics, and mathematics, and yeah, I remember doing my homework or whatever, and I was like, all of this is the same. This is all the same, and it's all math, And so then I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to focus on something, then let's just do the part that it all is, which is the maths.
Did you go and talk to any of the academic staff at any point to be like, hey, I think I've figured this thing out? Or was it just like, no, worked it out, I'm done?
Well, I had a teacher in high school who always said that all biology is chemistry, or chemistry is physics, or physics is math, and physics is just maths with pictures. That's so that's what he used to say. And so I guess I had that sort of view of it before, but I did like physics a lot at school. I think because, to be honest, there was this thing of like, oh, it's so hard, and then if you if you invest, if you practice, then you can get better at it. And I think I was in some way addicted to that feeling of getting really good at something that I thought was quite challenging at first. But then I watched this TED Talk, I think it was Eddie Wu, who talks about how a lot of us talk about our ability in mathematics really strangely when if you consider mathematics as a sense, just like we have a sense of sight, or we have a sense of hearing, we have a sense for mathematics or numbers, that intuition that we all sort of have of, you do a sum and you're like, oh, that's not quite right. That's the sense of mathematics. He was saying how it's unique to mathematics. If you can't see that well, you go and get glasses. You don't just go, oh, I'm not a sight person. Sights are not really for me. But that's the story we tell ourselves about mathematics, that, if it doesn't come naturally to us, then it's not for us. We're not good at it and we shouldn't try. And I think there's a great reason to deconstruct that, because it's not true. And also because I think it's quite damaging that many of us walk around with this like math phobia. And I think that it limits us, and we let ourselves be limited by it, which I think is destructive to our opportunities, as well as our sense of like confidence in what we can do. I think a lot of people hold mathematics as their like Achilles heel, that, oh, I could never. And I don't think that's true. I think many of us, tell ourselves that story. And sure, it might not be what we're interested in, and it might not be what we're naturally most good at. But I don't think that we tell ourselves the truth really with mathematics all the time. And I think we limit ourselves with the stories we do tell.
What gave you the desire to want to do it really well? Not necessarily just mathematics, but to be so driven.
I think it's interesting you say that. I don't see myself as all that driven, but
Sorry, I'm just going back to one thing you'd said, which was just like, I want to get better at this. Like,
yeah,
I'm hungry.
sure.
I'm hungry to get better at this. So that's what I was curious about.
Sure. I guess it comes back to this thing of wanting to be confident and capable. I've always held that as like, I want to be a capable person. I want to be an independent person. And looking at something and saying I can't do that feels really like undermines that sort of belief. And so anything that I look at and say I can't do that, that feels like a failure to me. And so what I try to do instead is be like, I could do that if I wanted to. I don't want to do that because it would take energy, time, commitment that I don't have. So in that way, yes, I can't do it because I don't have those resources. But I do believe that we can, not to be cliche, we can do anything if we put our minds to it. But it's just a matter of, what you have the time, energy, and resources and care for. And I think it is something motivating where then what I do choose to give my attention to, I choose it with the idea of what I love, of what I'm passionate about, and what I think will make an impact. And so in that way, it feels even more important when I do, pick, or when I do put my mind to something. It feels like, okay, this is important though, because I could do anything if I wanted to, but this is what I think is worth the resources that it takes.
It's like they say, you can have anything you want, you just can't have everything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You do have a finite amount of attention, and
Yeah.
time and energy is a big one. So yeah, you have to allocate those resources accordingly.
How do you choose? What's the criteria that you use to evaluate that? Because I guess one of the hard things being young,
Mm,
thinking about going to university, or once you're at uni, choosing certain paths, the
mm.
activities, extracurricular things you get involved in, there's so much choice.
Yeah, you're
How
right.
do
You're
you
right.
how do you narrow that down?
Maybe it's a little cliche, or maybe a little like romanticized of me to say, but I'd like to think that we know. I think we have something that sets our heart on fire, sets our passion alight, and I think that you feel yourself being gravitating towards something, and I think that's what that is. And even if it only starts as oh, I think that's a bit interesting, that sounds interesting. I think if you nurture that, if you follow those paths down to their completion, maybe not all of them end up with this is what I love, but maybe some of them end up with I like this, or I would like to spend an hour of my week doing this, if you're talking about co-curriculars and all of that. I think the best we can do is open ourselves to the suite of opportunities and then try. And I think you, to some extent, when you find something that you like.
Are you organized around those sort of things? And by that I mean, so for me, there's lots of things that I'm trying to improve at any one
Mhm,
time. I literally have a list of these are the goals I'm trying, not goals so much, but these are the things I'm trying to improve at. So for me right now, it's like storytelling. I've got a few physical things I'm trying to get stronger, trying to read, do better with my
mhm,
kids, like always improve with my kids, with my family, those sorts of things. Are you organized in some way around that? Have you sort of sat down
mm,
and,
not
or are you
really.
just following the process?
Yeah, I think maybe a story I tell myself is whilst you're young, you have, the privilege, I guess, of not having to prioritize as much or not having as many responsibilities. When you talk about your kids or you talk about tending to your health, I think all of those things are, important when you're young, but become more
It's
important.
more important
And
when you become my age.
and so I think it's a privilege to sort of run from thing to thing when you're young, and I think this is the time where you find what is resonant and what matters. I don't think I'm organized in terms of long-term goals of like, I want to be stronger, I want to be, this or that. But I think there are things that I enjoy doing. I love swimming. And so in the short term, I'm organized in that I'll organize my week or my day around like, okay, this is when I'm gonna, or I organize washing my hair around this is when I'm gonna swim. And in that sense, I guess it's yeah, making way for the things that are important or fulfilling in that way.
What advice would you have for somebody that's struggling to get motivated to run in those different directions,
Mm.
chase different things? Who kind of maybe
Um,
intellectually knows that it's good to try and push their comfort zone, but is just struggling to get started? What would you say?
mm. I read a really interesting piece yesterday, and it was about the difference between resting and a self-care to-do list. And how when we have ourselves a self-care to-do list, or it's like if you're feeling a bit unmotivated, feeling a bit down, and in your mind you're like, okay, well, I should do some yoga, I should go for a run, I should eat some vegetables. When you give yourself a list like that, then you tend to fixate on the list and you tend to make yourself feel guilty if you're not doing those things, and you tend to then invalidate those emotions of unmotivation or of, I don't know, being a bit lost or directionless. So I think if for somebody in that position, I guess I would advocate for giving yourself like a bit of time and patience. I think the worst thing that we do is we're really hard on ourselves. And I think I find this for myself, but I end up in a bit of a spiral of saying, "Oh, I'm not even helping myself. I'm not going out and doing these things. So then how can I deserve to feel like this?" And I think that's really damaging. So I would say to somebody like that, just find one thing, in a day, can be really little, that you want to do, that you're interested in, and then go there. Maybe you'll meet somebody who says, "Oh, you should come to this," and you can spiral out from there. But I think starting on the little scale, and don't beat yourself up about it.
It's really good advice. Really good advice.
Thank you.
What else do you do at uni? So what else are you involved in at Monash?
Um,
Fantastic university. Love the uni and just
yes.
so many opportunities for students at that
Mm,
place.
it's huge. But so at Monash in my first year, I was involved in like some clubs and societies. But since then, I feel like I've gone a bit more insular. And in my global challenges degree, you have a really strong cohort from that, and that's a wonderful community to be part of. And all of the projects that we do in global challenges are team projects, and so you have a lot of group work and you have a lot of collaboration. I think that to me, focusing in on that has replaced in some way the like clubs and societies kind of aspect of it.
You found your tribe.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I think as is a rite of passage for most Australian university students, playing mixed netball is a great thing to do at uni. I think it's something I don't think it's stretch to say everyone tries one. I grew up playing netball at school and just love so much the added social aspect of that. And so yeah, joined a few teams at uni as well. I'm trying to think what else I do. It's hard to be faced with, what do you do in a day? um, Now on exchange at Nanyang, I was living at a hall, and there's like a lot of hall teams and activities and all of that to go to, and it's similar to college at in Australia. Like you just go downstairs and like something's happening, you can be involved in.
Let's talk about that. You're in
Mhm.
Singapore right now.
Yes, I
How
am.
did you end up in Singapore?
Well, again, through Global Challenges, they encourage you to take an exchange semester or some sort of international experience so I'm in my third year, first semester. And so in this semester, our Global Challenges course our subject is an internship that you can do whenever.
Nice.
So it's flexible around studying abroad. And so I honestly, at the time, I was like, well, why not? Why don't I just go overseas and study for a bit? I think I'd always imagined for myself not living in Australia for my whole life. But so I went into the university website, what partners they have for exchange, and scrolled through, had a good look at which ones had courses that I was interested in, and which ones had, I guess, a good setup or a good, what's a good place to be, I guess, was a big factor, and applied for my exchange. And then after that, I was having coffee with a friend who was telling me he'd applied for this really exciting scholarship. And I said, tell me more. And we got talking about the New Colombo plan. And so then I ended up applying for that scholarship as well, which I'm so eternally grateful for sponsoring me to come overseas and do my exchange here. And then when I finish in May, I'm planning on going to India for 3 months and doing an internship there and doing some intensive language training in Hindi.
Aadya, this has been awesome chatting with you. I've had such a good convo. I wish we could just go on and on and on.
No, thank you for the opportunity. It's been great to chat to you too.
Wonderful. So if you're watching this at home, choosinguni.com, heaps of resources, independent content, advice, no other agenda than to help you make the decision that's right for you.